Okay, ladies, I'm gonna get started if you guys are ready.
Yes.
Yeah? Okay. So I'm gonna talk about title fraud today. Title fraud has a lot of different names, title fraud, real estate fraud, deed fraud, mortgage fraud, but it's all encumbered under the same thing, okay? So one of the most important things that title insurance covers, and a lot of people aren't aware of this, is we do cover fraud. Because we are kind of like the last ditch effort to fight fraud, to fight real estate fraud and any closing. It starts with you guys when you take the listing, and it ends with us right before we record that document. So what makes me, honestly, what makes me a good source when I talk about this topic is that I was a title officer for years and years. So I wasn't just a salesperson before this, right? Not that salespeople aren't great, but I was the guy in the office fighting the fraud firsthand, right? I was the guy checking the signatures, looking at the notary, making sure that the seller, that they are the actual owner of the property. Because when we say fraud, we mean people posing as the owner of the property and selling or recording a loan or pulling out money on the property. People, it's very, very easy to do that. But it's also very easy for me as a title officer to fight that fraud. And I believe that it's even easier for you guys to put it to a stop early on. There are a few key things that you guys can look out for early on in the transaction in order to fight fraud. And trust me, when fraud happens, just because the title insurance covers it, everybody gets pulled into that lawsuit if it goes down like that. Starting with you guys, to the notary, to escrow, to title, everybody will get pulled into that courtroom if the deal does close and it's found out to be fraud. So we all like visuals in these presentations. So I asked AI to take my image there and make me look like a fraudster. And that's what it came up with. That guy has bigger bags than I do, but I don't know. Apparently I look like a creep, so. Okay, so what is title fraud, right? In its most basic sense, and first of all, vacant land is the most highly sought after type of property for fraud. In its most basic sense, you buy a piece of land, to develop it, right? You start grading, and this guy shows up and he says, "Get off my land. I didn't sell the property." This is an exaggerated situation, but this is exactly what ends up happening. The buyer buys the land or the buyer buys the home, and they go up and then they find out that the actual seller wasn't, or the seller that they were dealing with wasn't the actual seller the entire time. This happens daily in Southern California, okay? 61% of all money laundering in the United States is done through real estate transactions, and a lot of it is done through title fraud. This is a real issue. Like I said, title fraud has many names. The first three are effectively the same thing, right? This is when you have a seller that isn't your actual seller. Simple enough. Mortgage fraud, I include here, and I include it for a very good reason, and it's because when I was a title officer, one did get by me, and it was an example of mortgage fraud. And so what do we do when we make a mistake like that? We learn from it, right? So I like to use that as a teaching example for you guys too, because in the end, when you're rushing, that's when mistakes happen. It's junk in, junk out, okay?
It happens to everybody.
Yes, and when you're rushing, it's all junk in, so you're gonna get junk out. That's when mistakes happen. And these fraudsters, they really rely on you rushing. They're gonna rush you every step of the way. List it right away. Let's list it below value. Let's close within a week or two. That's what they're gonna do. So I've covered what title fraud is. I can kind of skip through this because I don't want to make you read all that anyways. And please know, give me all your business cards before the end of the day so that I can send this to you as a PDF when we're done, because I'm going to cover a lot. I do not expect anybody to be an expert on this by the end of the day. I do consider myself an expert in this though, so I will send you the PDF so you can review it. More importantly though, I want you to have my contact information should you ever find a situation where you think you might have a fraudulent seller, okay? So why do you need to know? I mean, I'm going to go over quite a few slides here, but in the end of the day, our business is referrals and recommendations, right? How many referrals are you going to get if you closed transactions that ended up being fraud, right? Because those negative reviews, people are far more likely to leave a negative review than they are a positive review, right? And those go all over the internet. Recommendations. How likely are you to get a recommendation from a peer in the industry if they know that you aren't doing your due diligence up front to make sure that these transactions aren't fraud, right? So why is it your responsibility? First of all, we all have a fiduciary responsibility to our clients in the transaction, right? That starts with you guys on the listing agent side, and it ends with title. But there's a lot of people involved in these transactions. So transaction integrity, it's the same thing. We need to have integrity. There are detection signs early on. There are red flags that you guys can look out for early on that I'll go over, because I do personally believe that probably 99% of fraud that gets committed and closed on can be stopped. Financial protection. Now, like I said, it's not just the title company that's going to have to shell out for this, okay? They are going to look for whoever was responsible. In the case that I'll present later that I made the mistake on, multiple people were responsible, including myself in the end, right? I definitely will not say that I wasn't responsible for that one. But everybody will get pulled into the transaction. And if they find that when you took the listing early on and you didn't do your due diligence, then, I mean, the financial responsibility will lie on you, not just your brokerage. We all have a legal and ethical duty, like I said, aside from just our fiduciary responsibility to the client, just ethical, so that you can sleep at night. You need to know that you're doing everything you can to fight this fraud, to make sure that even if you're representing the seller, to make sure that buyer is getting a legitimate, clean title at the end of the day. And again, industry awareness, we stay educated on everything. There's a reason that you come to these classes, right? It's because you want to be educated. There's a reason that you go to the probate classes, right? The reason is you need to be an expert. More and more so as we go forward in this industry with things like Zillow and Realtor.com and Realist and all that, right? They're trying to take that job away from you, but what those websites can never do is be the experts in the industry that you are. The only way that you can be those experts is with industry awareness, right? By going to these types of classes. And that's what sets you guys apart. And of course, collaborate with your title professionals. We have the tools to be able to weed out fraud. There's a few things that you guys can do up front, but sometimes there's still questions, right? And that's when we can get involved. So, properties at risk. Absentee-owned properties are very risky properties. Now, all vacant land is absentee-owned because there's no home on that land, right? So it's all absentee-owned. What else is absentee-owned? Airbnbs, right? The actual owner doesn't necessarily live on the property. Investment properties, rental properties. People that, maybe it's their second home. They've got a home in Palm Springs, but they live in Oregon or whatever it is, right? Those are absentee-owned properties. Now, why are they at risk? It's simple, because the owner doesn't live there. They're not there to see the suspicious activity that's happening, right? Whether there's a for sale sign in their front yard, whether people are driving by looking at their property, whether they're getting mail at that property, right, regarding the sale of their home. And let me tell you, anything that you can pull, when you call your title company and you say, hey, can you give me the vesting deed on this property? We can do that because it's public record. It's easier for us to do that because we have the tools, but guess who else can do that? The fraudsters, just as easy. They can pull the chain of title on any property just as quick as I can, okay? So they can identify these absentee-owned properties and these properties that are unfortunately easy for them to take advantage of. So unencumbered and mortgage-free properties. An unencumbered property is just a property that's owned outright, right? There's no mortgage, there's no debt on the property. It doesn't necessarily mean there isn't a lien or some other kind of encumbrance on the property. But why is this important? Because the fraudsters want the most bang for their buck, okay? Now these guys are buttheads, but they do work hard for these closings, right? I mean, they're calling. You're not the only agent they're talking to. They're talking to a lot of different agents. They have the order open with as many different title companies as they can. So they are working hard to try to scam these properties. So if the property is unencumbered, they end up netting a lot more money from the fraudulent transaction in the end than they would if a payoff had to be made. Good morning.
Good morning.
So like I said, these are the reasons that they take advantage of mortgage-free properties. Also, there's no oversight from a lender. It's not always easy to order a payoff demand. I know it's quite hard to order like on a reverse mortgage if the owner's deceased, right? That kind of weeds out any fraudulent transactions. So in this case, there's no lender oversight if there's no loan on the property. They're going to get more money in the end. And there's, generally speaking, it's going to be, really that's it. That's what I went through. So vacant land, like I said, that's always the primary target for these fraudsters. And that's because vacant land, again, by its nature, is always absentee owned. And it's just that it's an easy transaction to close quickly, right? You can list it for $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, whatever. It'll be below market value and it will get picked up quick.
So how do you make sure that a vacant land is actually, the person that is selling is actually the actual owner?
I'll go through a few things. I'll give you a few easy tools to be able to do it. I promise you, by the end of this, you'll have some stuff in there. So what are these fraudster tactics? And you'll be able to reverse engineer this as I'm talking to, and you'll see what you can do, but I'll get to it. So the fraudsters are generally going to want to communicate only by email or text. They may get on the phone. I can tell you that I've been on the phone with the fraudsters before, and I've had fun with it. Especially once I know they're fraudsters, I shouldn't, but I'll get on and I'll start arguing with them or trying to pick at them. Don't do that. It's something that I'll suggest you don't do. But they're going to try to communicate only by email or text. The phone numbers are not going to match up. They're not going to be local phone numbers. They're not even going to be phone numbers that match up to whatever the return address if they're absentee owners. They're going to be some random phone numbers. They will always push for a rushed escrow. They're often going to list at below market value. They will outright refuse any in-person meetings because they probably aren't even within the states, right? There's no way that they can meet you. And a lot of the time they're going to push for a no for sale sign on the land. It's important for you guys to have that for sale sign. It's great marketing for you, and they're going to push for it not to be there. Now, when I say they're going to insist on their own notary, I can't stress the importance of having a trusted notary enough, okay? If somebody's pushing for their own notary on any transaction, even if it's not necessarily this type of fraud, it's probably, they're doing something fun, okay? You want to go with either escrow's trusted notary or title's trusted notary, because when I say that they have a notary that they're working with that will close on it, most of the time they just have the stamp in their back pocket. They don't even have to have a notary somewhere who's complicit in the transaction, right? They can have just bought a notary stamp on the black market. These things, you can buy them, you can fraudulently make them. Unfortunately, it's easier than it needs to be. So I'm going to go over some more red flags here. I'm going to kind of break them down by communication and what happens throughout the transaction. I will get a little bit repetitive in some of this, but it's because I think it's important. So again, the red flags when it comes to the communication, they're going to email and text only. They may get on the phone with you. They're going to be unreachable by the local phone numbers. And one of the few good things that came from COVID is our reliance and our ability to use things like Zoom and FaceTime and Meet and Teams, those kinds of things. Those are tools for us, right? They're great tools. Now, if they cannot meet you in person, if they truly are an absentee owner, in any transaction, you should still try to at least get on FaceTime with them just once through the life of the transaction. Because if they refuse that, it should be a warning sign for you. If you're worried that it's fraud and they do get on with you, like on a FaceTime, ask them to pull their ID and kind of show it to the screen, right? And then you can take a screenshot of the ID at that point. If they actually pull an ID out and it matches up, that gives you a little bit more comfort to know that you're dealing with the right person. Not 100%. I'll go over an example later that's shocking, but try to get them on FaceTime and try to get them to show you their ID. Now, red flags throughout the transaction. Okay, this one is kind of hard, and this is one that I put up there, but like I said, most of our business comes from referrals, right? Family, friends, you're taking advantage of your sphere of influence to the best of your ability, right? Now, if it's a cold call, somebody calls you out of the blue and you've never met this person, you ask them, hey, how'd you hear about me? And they say, well, I just found you online. Maybe your marketing is working. Maybe you've got a really good social media presence. Maybe those mailers that you mailed out are working, but it should be a red flag, right? So just take it with a grain of salt. When they say, I just found you, they could be Googling hundreds of other realtors and doing the same thing. So as amazing as it is to get a listing out of the blue, just be aware, be on the lookout when that happens. Again, when they're gonna list the property well below market value, that's a huge red flag. Cash only transactions, they're gonna rush you to close. And then again, when they refuse to use an escrow approved notary or a title approved notary. So I went over some of the behavior things already. One thing that I like to stress is evasive answers about property history. So what I mean by that, so say there's an uninsured deed on the property, right? And the current owner inherited it somehow or was gifted the property by maybe a family member or something. If you're dealing with a fraudster, they're not going to have the inside scoop on how they acquired the property. You might be able to say to the person that really owns the property, well, why was that deed, why was the property transferred to you? If you're dealing with somebody who doesn't know, they won't have any history on the property. They'll be able to pull the documents, but they're not going to know why the property was transferred. They're not going to have any of that kind of details that the actual owner would have. And then inconsistent documents or IDs. Again, I'm going to go over the IDs later because I have a crazy example. So the next few slides come from the FBI. I'm sorry, there's some tickle in my chest here. So these are what the FBI calls language fingerprints. So when you get a call from somebody and you know that it's fraud, you can kind of tell, right, just by the way that they speak, some of the things that they say. The number one word that fraudsters say in their communication with you guys, with anybody, and this can cover any type of fraud within the United States, is the word kindly. And I don't really know why, but apparently fraudsters use this. It's an often used term overseas, and they kind of use it in lieu of the word please. So they say, would you kindly send me a prelim? Would you kindly list it below market value? Just, that's one of the things that the feds want you to look out for. If they use the word kindly a lot, it's a red flag. They will also push friendship. So they're going to call you friend. They're going to call you buddy. They're going to try to make it seem like you guys are closer than you actually are. And this is just a tactic that these fraudsters use. And they're going to work religion into the transaction more so than seems natural, right? It's normal for us to sometimes, God willing, we'll close on Friday. That's not an unusual thing for some of us to say in a transaction. But the fraudsters are going to overuse it because they're trying to play on your guilt, okay? And then some more of the common clues when it comes to language fingerprints. This is true, right? They're not going to have all the perfect pronunciation, punctuation, grammar that we have, right? But you're going to start seeing this less because of things like ChatGPT and other generative AI text models, right? You should be relying on these tools too, right? They can help you, start with an idea and kind of, get a nice, good email out of it, right? But the fraudsters are going to do the same thing. They're going to drop it into ChatGPT so that it comes out in perfect English and they don't have to worry about anything. So less and less, is this going to be something you can rely on, the broken English, right? Sorry, I forgot I put them in there twice. Okay, so this is my favorite part. I want to go over some real world examples, okay? So when I was a title officer, I worked with a sales rep, I worked with an agent in the high desert, and she was a top producing agent. When you Googled, realtor, high desert realtor, Victorville, she was the #1 name that always popped up. So she got a lot of calls out of the blue. So it wasn't unusual for her to get a call from somebody that wasn't necessarily a referral. She had her red flag on though, because it was, or she was worried. Her feelers went up because all of the communication was by email and phone. So they did get on the phone. It was an out-of-state area code, and she had some concerns. So she called me, right? Because she was kind of worried about it. So she called me, and all she ended up giving me was the person, the owner of the property's name and the phone number of the person that she was dealing with, right? That was all I had to start from. But from a title insurance standpoint, that's all I need. I can look up the actual owner of the property. I can use my tools to find a good phone number. I can match it up to the phone number that the fraudster is using and see if it's legitimate. We can also search the phone number that the fraudster is using and see if it's associated at all with anybody that might own that property. So in this case, I was able to find a good phone number for the actual owner of the property. I called them, I talked with the owner of the property. They verified that they are not selling the property, right? So it was fraud. Now, in this case, the sales rep that I was dealing with, not the agent, the sales rep would always ask for the phone number of the actual owner, because at this point we do have a legitimate buyer lined up, right? And the seller may still be willing to sell, so they would always try to turn it into an actual transaction. I just thought that was kind of funny that they tried to turn this fraud into a real transaction, but that's one way of getting a business. They did have a buyer lined up. So what could she have done instead? So this to your point, okay? You're kind of worried about it. First of all, I think when you get a call for any listing, I think the first thing you should do is ask for their identification. Ask them to send you a text message or a picture of their ID. Not everybody's going to be willing to do this up front, right? But especially when it's vacant land, it should be a hard and fast rule for you to ask for a copy of their ID. A lot of the time, escrow will end up asking for it throughout the life of the transaction. But again, at that point, you've invested your time and money into the property, right? If you ask for it right away and they ghost you, there is a very good chance that this is fraud. So if they refuse to send it to you, there's a good chance that it's fraud. You can use things like Spokio or the white pages too to do a reverse search on the phone number that they're calling you from. These are very easy tools. I can tell you that Spokio it's kind of scary how much data they have. You can put in a phone number and it will immediately tell you the names that that phone number is associated with, okay? So that's another tool that you can do up front to figure out if you're dealing with a fraudster. And then, like I said before, request a FaceTime or a Zoom meeting, because if they refuse it, that's another red flag. So they won't give you their ID, they won't get on FaceTime with you. You probably shouldn't be dealing with these people. Those are the things that she could have done, right? So here's another real world example. So in this case, and I'm going to go over the specifics of what happened in this one too. In this case, the fraudster was targeting absentee owned properties. And they noticed that the return address on the grant deed was an overseas address. So this is really ripe for fraud. In this case, it happens a lot. All the communication was by phone and email, which isn't unusual in this case, right? Because the actual owner is overseas. So they're not going to be here to meet up with you. Your feelers aren't necessarily going to go up that quickly. So what we did is we requested that they go to the embassy to get notarized. This was really the only thing that we could do, right? I mean, the phone numbers all kind of checked out. We were still kind of concerned about it. So we said, well, if they go to the embassy, there's a good chance that, I mean, really, the embassy is going to make you prove that you are who you are, okay? You're not going to get you're not going to fool the embassy. So that was Title's request in the end. We asked them to go to the embassy. And in this case, the notarization came back and it was very obviously fraudulent. I'm going to show you the example later too, and some of the ways to identify a fraudulent embassy notary. But the issue with this one is it got all the way down to closing, right? So it was the day of closing, we were going to record the deed, and the deed's in my hand, and at that point that we identified that it's fraudulent. This is why we need to look for the red flags early on so that it doesn't get down to that point, okay? So here's the one that I really want to talk about, and this is the one that got by me. So first of all, it was a loan, right? It was a refi. So I wasn't necessarily thinking about fraud when I was closing it. Escrow called me later on in the day and they said, hey, can you guys get this one on for the day? So it was going to be a rush closing. It seemed like it was low risk for me because it was a trusted escrow company that I work with all the time, and it was just a hard money loan on the property. They didn't have any mortgages on the property, but there were a few payoffs that we made too. There was a tax lien, I think like a $30,000 tax lien. They had some delinquent taxes, but the important thing was that we weren't paying off any deeds of trust. And again, it was a rush closing. So I actually had some concerns. I thought it was a bit unusual. The signature seemed kind of weird, but I had enough to where I figured, you know, the risk is really low on this one. We are making some payoffs and it's just a loan, and I really trust this escrow officer, so I'm going to let this one go. So what happened to me? Well, a few weeks after we closed, the actual lender on that deed of trust called me. And he said, you know, I think something's weird with this one. And so my first thought was, I wish you would have told me that, you know, 3 weeks ago. And he says, you know, I'm talking with the actual owner. So he had actually called the real owner of the property at this point, right? And he said that she mentioned that there were squatters on the property, and she knew that there were squatters on the property, but it's very hard to evict these squatters sometimes, especially when you're out of state. So she had chosen to kind of just ignore it until she turned around to sell the property. So in this case, the squatters lived on the property and they collected as much mail as they could as possible to find as much information on her as possible. Because if you think about it, I mean, enough information comes in the mail to where eventually you can pose as that person, right? You may end up even getting somebody's social security number. So they were able to compile enough information to fill out the loan application with all of her information on there, to where the lender had no issue with it, right? He even ran a credit check on the actual owner of the property because they had her social security number. So they had everything. They had all the works on this one. And they went to a notary, and the notary had concerns. The notary said, you know, I thought it was weird because it was this nice older lady, but there was these two guys kind of standing in the back watching as she signed the deeds. She was saying, I had concerns, but I let it go. So there you go. When I say everybody gets pulled into the lawsuit, the notary had concerns, but she still notarized the document, okay? Again, I had my concerns, but I still let it close. The lender had concerns early on, but he still let it go. And the notary took her concerns to the escrow officer before we closed and told them, I kind of think this one's fraud, but I'm not too sure. And the escrow officer felt comfortable enough with it to let it go too. And they didn't mention it to me before we had closed, right? It doesn't matter. I still could have caught it. You know, we all made mistakes somewhere along the line. So in a case like this, the ID wouldn't have helped all that much. Really, all that could have been done was when we were closing, I should have refused to allow myself to rush that closing. I should have pulled documents to compare signatures down the line. And, you know, I should have been 100% sure. So in the end, I made that mistake because I was rushing. So when they call you and they ask you for a rush closing, this is what they're relying on. They're relying on you guys, getting messy and making mistakes. So what can you do? Request IDs on all transactions, request Zoom or FaceTime, reverse search the phone numbers, Google white page alternate phone numbers. So what do I mean by that? Don't just trust the number that they're calling you from. Not everybody has two phone numbers necessarily, but they may be married and you may be able to find the phone number for the actual spouse of the owner of the property, right? So do a white pages search, try to find some other phone numbers and call those phone numbers, right? And just see if you're dealing with the actual person. Only use trusted notaries and use your resources. And if they ghost you, don't go chasing them, okay? Never. So here's a few things that you can do in addition to asking for the ID. This is something that escrow does quite often too, and I know that we do it in title. But if you're concerned that you're not dealing with the actual owner, pull the vesting deed, okay? The vesting deed is gonna have the return address when they bought the property, right? That return address is legitimate because they actually bought the property, and then, if they're absentee owned, that return address is likely still valid. Send a letter to that return address, just thanking them for the transaction. Just saying, hey, thank you for choosing me to represent you in this sale, okay? It doesn't have to be certified. It doesn't have to be signed or anything like that. Like, they don't have to sign to receive it. All you're paying for it is 78 cents for postage. And if it goes to the actual owner and they're not actually selling the property, they're gonna call you real quick. And they're gonna say, what are you talking about? I did not list my property with you. So in the end, it would cost you 78 cents to save yourself from that lawsuit. And it's a win-win scenario. Either you find out that it's fraud and you back out, or you sent a really nice letter to the actual homeowner thanking them for the transaction. So it's either good marketing or you're saving yourself from a fraudulent transaction. And it only costs you 78 cents. But you can do that again early on in the transaction so it doesn't get down to closing. So a lot of the time, it will pass the sniff test, but we still have concerns, okay? Now, I like to say that real estate's a team sport, and that's because on average, 15 to 25 people touch any given real estate transaction throughout the life of the transaction, right? So it starts with you guys when you take the listing, the notaries, escrow, mortgage, title, 15 to 25 different people. That means 15 to 25 different people have a chance to see the warning signs, to stop this before it closes. So what can we do as your partners to fight fraud? Again, you want to send letters to the return addresses. Now, comparing signatures is more of a title thing. So here's what I mean by that. We get the deed in the end to close, right? The deed is signed by the seller, it transfers the property over to the buyer, you know what that is. What I can do is I can look at that deed and I see the signature on the deed. I can pull the chain of title and I can record any liens or any mortgages that the seller had on the property in the past. And I can compare those signatures to that deed. Because again, those loans are legitimate. If that signature on that deed of trust doesn't match up to the grant deed, then we know we have an issue, right? Sometimes it just ends up being that it's 30 years later and their signature doesn't look the same. Unfortunately, sometimes they'll say, well, I had a stroke and so my signature changed because of that. But different signatures are a huge red flag. So that is more of a title thing. It's something that you guys can do. You can request the chain of title, but that's something that we do on our end. We will always require a trusted notary in certain transactions. This isn't for every document, but does escrow require trusted notaries on everything?
We prefer signing us, assigning the notary, then letting an agent, or we'll have our TC, because when I tell them, if you guys sign outside escrow, we're not responsible for it. We're not going to review the documents.
Like we are responsible.
Well, yeah, but I'm saying, but if they missed anything, that's not our,
Yeah, so that's another one of those things, right? So we've got this outside party that would end up getting pulled in the transaction, and we have to take their word for it. So
and I keep that email in my file that they
Yes.
want to sign outside of escrow. I keep it in my file.
yeah, and that's a choice that in the end, the agent is pushing to use a different notary, so they're taking the onus upon themselves to use a notary that's not trusted. Another thing that I can do personally is I can reach out to the prior insurer, okay? So what do I mean by that is when they bought the property, the actual owners, they were issued title insurance. So there is good information on that with another competitor. We all support each other in this, all title companies, because we all have to fight the same thing. Don't get me wrong, we're out there competing for orders, right? But when it comes down to fraud, we all play well with each other. So if I call Chicago Title and I say, hey, you insured these guys in the title, what was the birthday on the statement of information at the time? So I'll match that up. If it doesn't match my SI, then I know we have an issue. There are things that we can do. Even if it gets all the way down to closing, and you still have concerns, but it passed every other test, there are ways that we can, I'm sorry, I didn't silence my phone, guys. There are ways that we can fight it. I think I went through everything. There are many times where I'll speak with a family member too, right? Again, I have sources where like I can type in somebody's name and their address, and I can find phone numbers for their children, for their spouse, for whomever. I'll pick up the phone and I'll say, hey, is your dad selling this property? And once I get done explaining to them how common fraud is, usually I can get over their concerns or their anger that I'm calling them out of the blue, right? But don't be afraid to call family if it comes down to that. Visit the property, at the very least, drive by the property early on, visit the property, maybe knock on the door. And then if it comes down to it, you can't actually see anybody on the property, talk to the neighbors, get their feel for it. Hey, I'm listing this property. It's a good idea to knock on the neighbors' doors anyways, right? You're trying to drum up interest in the property. Knock on the doors and just get their feel for it. And so what I like to say at this point is don't be afraid to get uncomfortable. Don't be afraid to pick up the phone and call these phone numbers that might not be the phone number they're calling you from. Don't be afraid to send that letter to the return address, right? Because it's a lot better that you get uncomfortable early on, in the life of the transaction, because you're going to be a lot more uncomfortable when they pull you into that lawsuit. Okay, so what can you do prior to closing when you know that it's fraud? Okay, so this is the point where you know that you have a fraudulent transaction. What should you do at this point? The first thing, and probably the most important thing, is to call the title insurance company. I say that's the most important thing because we can post, we can put a posting on the chain of title. Just like what I showed you earlier when I was showing you the chain. Yeah, there would be a big red line there. And it basically is a warning sign to all title companies, don't close on this. Like I said, we play well with each other when it comes to fraud.
And then
Okay?
anybody that tries to open the title is already.
Yes, they're gonna see it, exactly. So call your title company so they can post a flag.
But is that a recording?
It's not a recording, no. So
It's an internal thing that the title insurance company, so anybody, title company, say if they're doing fraud and they want to go to another title company, oh, we're gonna go to this one because they're not insuring for some odd reason, it's already flagged on the system.
Yeah.
So anybody can see it, so they know there's an issue right now.
So we're all pulling like the chain of title from similar sources, right? So it looks like it's a recorded document. It's not though, but we post, it's called an OI, an office informational posting. So basically it's just a big red line that draws our attention to it and then a small note that says potential fraud. Okay, so it's not something that's actually recorded, but it's something that title companies would see internally. If you know that it's fraud, notify your escrow officer immediately, let them know. Notify the buyer's agent, everybody needs to know. Contact the county recorder. So I'm gonna take a bit of a detour here, okay? Do you know that you can walk into the county recorder today, and as long as the document that you're trying to record is recordable, you can record anything on anybody's property? And I'm talking a quitclaim deed,
Yeah.
deed of trust, list pendants, anything. I could walk down to any of your properties and record anything I want, as long as the deed meets their requirement to be recordable. So you tell me, what is the county recorder doing to fight fraud? Nothing, nothing at all. I was invited to a phone town hall recently with Josie Gonzalez, who's the county assessor, right? And they invited us to ask questions. So I was the first person to say, yes, I want to ask a question. And they screened the questions. So I told them, my question is, what are you guys doing to fight fraud? I work in title insurance. I'm on the front line to this. And she never picked up my call. She never picked up my question. They skipped right over me. I know for a fact I was one of the first people to suggest the question, and they skipped right over me because they are doing nothing to fight fraud. They'll tell you, what can we do? Well, they can check IDs. There's definitely ways that they can verify that they're dealing with the actual property owner.
Especially they have the system that search it, you know?
Yeah, they can.
I heard there, if it's an accommodation recording, they require one of the owners to be there and show the ID. Is that true?
Well, what's an account? So
Like, not a real sale, no title insurance.
some title companies may require that, but you can also mail things into the county recorder. So even if some county offices may require some kind of ID up front, you can still mail things in and get them recorded.
The only time they ask you for an accommodation form is the title company, and there's one of the records that's recorded, and so they just do it as a waiver for the title company.
Yeah.
They're-
So there are times where, the county recorder, if they know that it's a title person going in there, they'll kind of change their
Yeah.
requirements a little bit. But it is unfortunately very easy to record anything on anybody's property. So when I say that if you know it's fraud, to contact the county recorder, it's not a waste of time because they will put a note on the property, okay? They still have to record anything that anybody walks in to record, but they will put a note and it'll put them on a heightened alert for it, okay? Really what you're doing is padding it to where if fraud ever does happen, it makes it easier to fight it in the end. You do want to file a report with the DA, with the California Department of Real Estate, and with the local police, okay? What are they going to be able to do in the end? Probably nothing, because these fraudsters are probably overseas and we're never going to be able to get in front of them to actually prosecute them. I think it's important to file these reports with the DA, with the local authorities, because they need to be aware how often this happens. I have an agent that I work with, and he does a lot of vacant land. He has 80 listings right now of just vacant land. And so he calls me a lot. Hey, I'm concerned about this one. Hey, this one's fraud again. So he called me yesterday, and I'm thinking, okay, he's gonna have a question or maybe a new order. And he goes, I just want to talk to you again about fraud. So we're on the phone for 30 minutes, and he's like, well, what do they do? What do they do? I said, they really don't do anything. So he's going to draft a letter with as many signatures as he can to send to local representatives telling them about how easy it is for people to commit title fraud. I think it's a great idea, and I hope it goes somewhere. And this is why I always suggest that you report it with the DA, with the Department of Real Estate, and the local police. So if it's closed, right, unfortunately, we didn't catch it. You find out later on that it was a fraudulent transaction and we actually closed. Excuse me, guys, sorry. First thing you want to do still is call the title company, because you want to file a claim with them. You want to get their attorneys working on it immediately to be able to rectify the situation. So if it was a fraudulent transaction where you had somebody posing as the seller and we actually closed, the title company will represent the actual owner of the property. They'll get a quiet title action to basically void that deed, to put the property in the correct owner's name. There's quite a few different things, but they are going to work to rectify it. But you want to call them first so they can file the claim. It also wouldn't be a bad idea, depending on the title company that you're working with, and I'm not here to disparage anybody, but some title companies' claims departments are harder to work with than others. So it wouldn't be a bad idea for them to maybe get involved with the real estate attorney as well. So maybe if the claims department for the title company they're working with isn't playing ball, hook them up with a real estate attorney. And again, contact the county recorder, contact the DA, and the local police. Now here's what not to do. And again, I'm guilty of one of these. Don't ignore your gut or the red flags, okay? I mean, your gut's gonna tell you, first of all, you're gonna be very excited to take the listing. Oh, I've got a new listing, even if it's just vacant land, right? It's gonna be very exciting, but listen to your gut, listen to the red flags, look out for the red flags. Don't proceed with the transaction. I wouldn't have put anything on here if somebody hadn't tried, okay? But there have been cases where I have empirical evidence that it's fraud, where I can show you for a fact, this is a fraudulent transaction, and I'll bring it to the listing agent, and they still push me to close. No, it's not. I talked to them. They're so nice. This isn't fraud. I'm sorry that they think that I'm the one taking the commission out of their pocket, but it's a fraudulent transaction. They're not going to get paid for it anyways, right? Or if they do, they're going to be pulled into the lawsuit regardless. So don't push to proceed with the transaction if the title company is telling you for sure that it's fraud. And don't confront the suspected fraudster. Again, as fun as it may be, don't get on the phone with them, because I have done it. I spent probably 30 minutes on the line with the fraudster once. I don't know what I was trying to accomplish with it, but after I got off the phone, I remember I hung up and my boss came out. She goes, did you have fun doing that? And I said, yeah. And she goes, don't do it again. I said, okay, you got it. So don't discuss the suspicion with people who aren't involved in the transaction. Just keep it internal. Let your title company know, your escrow company know, let the agents know, right? Don't conduct your own investigation. So what I mean by that is, yes, do your due diligence, right? Make sure that you're dealing with the right person. But after that, once it's fraud, don't try to go and do it any farther. Let the authorities handle it at that point. Again, I wouldn't put anything on here if it hadn't been tried, but don't alter or fix documents. I have had situations where I clearly see whiteout on the notary box or whatever, that they found something early on, and I'm talking the agent went in and whited something out to try to hide something from title. Don't do that. Don't alter any document. And don't delay reporting your concerns. If you're concerned early on, even if you're not convinced, just let people know that you have concerns. Make me the bad guy, right? You represent the seller in the best light as possible. Make title be the bad guy. I'll get on the phone and I'll call people. That way, in the end, you can say, I don't know why they did that. If it ends up being a legitimate transaction, at least at that point, we know. Morning. So I talked about fraudulent embassy or consulate notarizations earlier. I'm gonna show you an example, but the fabricated notary stamp isn't gonna comport with the US embassy or consulate stamps. You can Google what an embassy notary usually looks like. They are all slightly different, but they're all gonna basically look the same. On the fraudulent ones, you'll see that they'll handwrite in a city and country. That shouldn't be on there. It's always a stamp. They're gonna misspell things. They're gonna have a commission expiration date. Notaries for the embassy or the consulates, their commission doesn't expire. As long as they're an employee of the consulate, their commission is never ending. And yeah, that's it. So this is what an authentic example of a notary done at the consulate would look like. This right here is an embossed seal, meaning it's, three-dimensional. You can feel it, right? Once we go over it with the carbon paper, you can see it a little better when it scans. Up there where it says state and county, it's a stamp. Nothing is handwritten in there. There's no mention of an expiration date for their, it actually says commission indefinite as well. And this is the exact example. So this is one that we got in that was fraud, okay?
You can see.
It's completely different, right? The only thing that makes you think maybe it's an embassy is that it says the word embassy here. But this is very clearly fraud, right? Just because they tell you they went to the embassy, and just because the stamp says the word embassy on it, doesn't mean they actually went to the embassy. So what are the signs that it's fraud? They have the city and country written in there. That will never, ever be the case. It will always be stamped. There's an expiration date listed for the for their commission. That will never be the case, okay? So here's an example of, I keep pressing to you to ask for IDs early on, okay? Here's an example of when somebody did. They asked for the ID early on and they were presented with an ID. This is the exact identification that they were presented with. If you look at where the name, the birthday, and the nationality, it kind of looks different from the rest of the document, right? Not super different, but kind of different. I'm not familiar with all passports. I don't know what they all look like. I know what the American passport and the Mexican passport looks like, and that's it, okay? But this one was concerning to us. So we kind of racked our brains. We're like, oh, what can we do? And one of us had the idea of doing a reverse Google image search on this. So the way Google works is when you want to look for an image, you type in what you want to look for, right? A beautiful home and a picture of a beautiful home will pop up. You can also do the reverse of that, and you can drop in the actual image itself, and it will search the internet for the other examples of that image online, okay? Or similar examples. So we did exactly that. I dropped in this image into the reverse Google image search, and you'd be shocked at how many examples we found, but we saw that identification over and over and over again. People posting it saying that it was a fraudulent passport. So people were using this for other types of fraud as well. And I believe in the end, this may have been the actual one, although I don't know why it would have been online, but you can see that it matches up a little bit more, right? So ultimately, we use the tools that we have at our disposal. And most of these are free tools. Google reverse image search is a free tool, and it will save you a lot of heartache and a lot of money in the end of, just dropping in the ID. You don't have to be an expert in identification to be able to identify these fraudulent transactions. Another tool that you can use is, this is one that we partner with, but there are a lot of different companies. There's MyTech. This one's called Notary Cam. So this is $20, and basically they'll get online. It will ask them some questions that only the actual owner of the property would know. It does that by searching records of the actual individual. It'll say, of these 4 property addresses, which one have you lived at, and things like that, right? It finds all of that because the information is already online. It also makes them get on the camera. It'll make them pull up their identification, and it will try to match up the photo on the ID to the person who's actually in front of the camera. So this is one extra tool that you can do.
It's called the seller verified.
Sorry?
I was looking at the name.
Excuse me, yeah, Seller Verified by Notary Cam. So again, it ends up being $20. That $20 can save you a lot of heartache in the end. So what do we do? What does Stewart Title do? On any transaction that's absentee owned, we automatically send off the letter, right? Regardless of anything. I'm talking the second we get the listing freedom, we send off the letter. So that's something that should be done on everything, but we do it automatically. We will call independently verified phone numbers. We're always going to compare the signatures if we have concerns in the end. Like I said, we're not afraid to get on the phone and call family members. And there's a good reason why we're dedicated to fighting fraud at all costs, and it's because it's very costly in the end if we close on it, okay? I don't know if I mentioned the amount. The one that I ended up closing on, the fraudulent transaction, was $160,000. So it was a $160,000 claim that the company that I was with at the time had to shell out. So I took that very personal, and like I said, I learned from it. So the quick wins, simply asking questions can honestly like scare them off. Asking for their ID, asking for some information on the property. When they see that you're a smart agent and that you're cognizant of how much fraud is going on out there, they're going to ghost you right away. So the key takeaways: vacant land, always be on the lookout, always be worried. If it's vacant land, ask for the IDs. Unencumbered properties, very high risk. The fraudsters are going to, they're going to rely on rushing you, because if you rush, you're going to be less careful. Us working together, like I said, 15 to 25 people deal with these transactions. I do believe that if we work together, that we can stop 99% of all fraudulent transactions. If you have any concerns at all, talk to your title person early on, because when we work together, we can stop these. And then one more thing I want to talk about with these is wire fraud, which you guys could probably talk to these to wire fraud a lot better than I can. But if anything that you get in an email that's asking for any kind of information, just be wary of it, okay? Because when somebody says that their email was hacked, it doesn't literally mean that somebody hacked into their email. It means that somebody got an email from them, copy pasted their signature line so that they can now send emails that looks like it's coming from that person. And then they made a new email address and they changed maybe one thing in it. So like for me, they would change the I in Atencio to a 1. You're not necessarily going to catch that. It's going to look like it's from me. It'll have my signature line, and it's going to say, here's the new wire instructions. And now when your buyer sends the money, or God forbid, when the lender sends the money, they send it to my personal bank account, and then I send it to Russia and Switzerland and who knows where else after that. Don't rely on an email you get for anything. Always call to verify. Pick up the phone and call to verify. Thank you have the right wire instructions. And then I'll go to the Q&A in a second here. But I wanted to touch on FinCEN as well. That's something that I promised that we talk about. This topic was actually, I was supposed to talk about FinCEN today until I got delayed to March. But are you guys familiar with what's going on with FinCEN, the AML rule that's coming in March?
No.
And how it'll affect you? No? Okay, so on any transaction where an entity is purchasing and an entity is now defined as a corporation or an LLC or a trust, if it's an all cash or a hard money transaction, there's going to be a lot more information that the buyers and the sellers are going to have to turn over. So that's something that's done by the Department of the Treasury called FinCEN, it's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, and the actual rule is called the AML rule, the Anti-Money Laundering Rule. Like I said, 61% of all fraud that happens in America is done through real estate, okay? So this new rule is, it was built to fight that fraud, and it does actually work. There are examples of it working right now because it is in place in certain counties. So starting March 1st of next year, if you have a transaction, especially with your investors, if they're purchasing all cash and they're purchasing in the name of an entity, just ask early on, ask escrow what you're going to need to complete so that we can get that information early. It is built into the RPA. There's an addendum that's attached to the RPA already, but it's going to be baked into the RPA itself, so you'll see it on there soon enough. But that's what the anti-money laundering rule is. Now, once we get closer to March 1st, you're going to start hearing about it more and more. But if you work with any investors at all, just be cognizant of it because they're going to complain when it comes down to it. They're not going to want to fill this information out, but everybody has to do it. Ultimately, the title companies are going to be the ones that are going to report this. It does lie on escrow first, but most title companies are setting up systems to where we will be the reporting company in the end. Escrow will help get the information and we will be the ones to report.
It's a lot.
We're doing our best to get everything off of it. Okay, so I want to ask you guys, have any of you dealt with any title fraud, real estate fraud, or anything? Can I hear the example?
Yes, it closed escrow. It was a San Bernardino property. It was a cash deal, everything. And when we closed escrow, it dawned on me because when I see the wire instructions say you need to wire to cash app, remember?
Oh, wow, cash app.
And I said, wait. So the first thing I did, because I had overnight the check, I put a stop payment on that check.
Okay.
Luckily, I was able to stop, and it was a Fidelity title game.
Yeah.
They had to reverse it to go up, but luckily I was able to stop that transaction, the money, so the seller those fraud people never had access to the money, so we had the money. They did lose a couple because it was dispersed, but I had to get, everybody had to give me, everybody had to return back their money.
See, that's good, because in the
But we
end,
caught it because I saw when the wire instructions, and then I got a weird email, remember, it was a weird email, and like, wait, I'm gonna go with my gut, and I put a stop, I said, this is fraud, there's something going on, and when I see, you need to wire to Cash App, you don't wire to Cash App. And that was like my red flag, I put a stop payment on the check right away. FBI was involved, actually, they just came a couple of months ago again, here.
Yeah.
Because they were still, they caught the people and everything, but they wanted to come and talk to me
you see,
again, so I wouldn't have to go to court.
so these people were actually in the States.
Yes, they were actually in San Bernardino, they busted them.
Good.
They busted them, they did, they went to jail, one of them, we found, remember I told you that one of them he hanged himself up in jail because he didn't want to serve time, that's what they did.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was bad, they found a lot of fraud, so I think it was probably like 3-4 months ago, the FBI still came.
Yeah, so there you go, so that's
And I
the
became good
example.
friends with him, with the DA detective and everything.
That's a good friend to have.
So he gave me his card, he's like, no, I don't want you going to the court, I'm gonna just record you here, so you don't have to go, I told him I'll come and take, so he came in.
Yeah, because in the end, you're the hero of that transaction, right? You stopped it, and the people got their money back, you still have to reverse the deed, so
I
things-
really did title, fidelity, reverse the deed,
Yeah.
FBI had the money, so nobody got paid, it was a chain of investors, so they pulled everybody into the lawsuit.
Yeah. It reminds me too, that this is totally
You
unrelated, but
probably were there when you heard about that file.
there's a good chance, but this is kind of unrelated, but I was walking into a store once and there was somebody asking for money, and I was like, I'm sorry, I don't have anything. Oh, you can Cash App me. I said, well, that's a first.
That was my whole thing when I saw the wire instructions and they said, you don't want to check, I want you to wire to Cash App. I'm like, Cash App?
Super weird.
And I said, heck no, and I had sent the check GSO and I put a stop to it. Literally, when the FBI guy came in a couple months, I still had that sticky note on my computer, do not, because I'm the one that approves the checks to clear it out. I still have a note on that check, over there for approve this check, even like, don't,
But the fact that they tried it probably means that somebody did it somewhere along
And
the
the
line. There
emails
was probably
you can
some other
see-
escrow company who Cash App them or something.
And the emails, and that's where it triggered to me, when I saw the emails, I wait, this is not, this is weird, and that's how I printed all the emails, so I'm glad that I stopped it. I mean, I had already recorded, I felt bad for the buyer, he was an investor, and I said, your money's gonna sit here until they tell me to release this money, I'm gonna release, it's my money, and like, I'm sorry, I can't reverse it.
But that goes to my point too, that, if the warning signs early on, and maybe there were no warning signs in this case,
They did their own notary, it was a quick, like you said, transaction.
all the warning signs were there.
Recorded and everything, and it was just weird, it wasn't a sign, it was a for sale by owner, it was a sign. And actually, the officer that was at that time, she wasn't here anymore, so I ended up with that file. So it was like a change, but the day after he recorded, that's how, it was like 1 or 2 days after, that's when it happened.
It's similar to the one that got by
Yeah,
me.
so
We
I'm
were
glad that I
rushing.
was able to put stop payment on the check, it was like a almost a $300,000 transaction,
Scary.
so.
I had one, like you described, the email address was changed a little bit.
Yeah.
And the guy pretended to be Ken, my agent, my listing agent.
Yeah.
And so he got himself in the email where it's between me and the lender. Usually listing agents are not in that chat.
Yeah.
Okay, and he was trying to just converse and make people feel comfortable that he was already there.
Trying to be friendly, like I said earlier, yeah.
And I was thinking, why would Ken be in here? This has nothing to do with the listing agent. After a couple of emails, I called Ken. I said, Ken, why are you asking
What do you,
these questions? What are you doing?
let me do my job.
He says, I didn't do that. The email was changed just a little bit. He was trying to, I'm pretty sure, at some point, change the wiring instructions.
Oh.
That's what he would have gotten around to.
So when the lender gal, she started replying to him, and I wrote her on the side, I said, no, that's not a real email.
See, what that is right there, what he's doing by getting in and trying to be friendly.
Yeah.
It's called social engineering, right? He's getting in there, he's being friendly with you. I have an example of that, if you guys don't mind me talking about this. It's unrelated to real estate fraud, but somebody knocked on my dad's door. Somebody knocked on my dad's door and said, you're eligible for a free phone because of Medicare or your benefits or something like that. I love my dad, but he's a simple man, right? And usually he's kind of a dick too. So usually he'd tell him to go away. It hurts, and he has a phone, but that day he decided to entertain them. So he's sitting there talking to them. And my mom, she's like super paranoid to probably a bad extent, right? So she's kind of yelling in the background, hey, don't go out there, don't listen to them, don't talk to them. So my dad goes outside with them, and by the time my mom gets out there, that person is taking a picture of my dad's identification. Okay, who and why? Like, why would that have happened? So my mom ended up having to put a credit lock on his thing. So probably for the best, anyways. Terrified me. I get on the phone with them. I'm like, Dad, why? Well, there's a free phone. You have a phone, Bob. You probably have the newest iPhone. Like, what are you doing? Why do you want to? Do you have some second life I don't know about? You need a second phone? So what the funniest part is, ultimately he goes, I let them take the picture because I was mad at your mom for yelling at me. So he was willing to burn it all down because my mom's sitting there yelling at him. But again, you know, they made friends with him early on. It was social engineering. They knocked on the door, they mentioned benefits, you know, all that stuff that for him, he's hearing things that ring kind of true, and they were able to get him out the door. But that's exactly what that guy that was closing his stand was doing. He's trying to be friendly, trying to, you know, get comfortable with you guys, and you're comfortable with him, even though it's not really Ken, so that you can say, oh, and here's the new wire instructions, send it here, and then boom, it's
That's
gone.
where we double verify those wires. We said, not all give the sellers. We said, send me a copy of your void check, but text it to me. Do not send it to the email, and I'll call you to confirm it's you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because we've had wire fraud before.
Yeah.
Lucky that when that happened, I mean, it was a lot of money, over $500,000 to customers, and it happened to the same officer. Lucky, they were going to Wells Fargo, and Wells Fargo is one of the banks. If you wire and it does not match, they keep the money. They don't credit it to that account. They don't return the wires like Bank of America does and all the other banks. Now they're finally, I think, but it takes days.
Aren't they the ones that they don't call the verify wire?
They don't call, so they just don't. They'll, if you send it, if you have a transposed digit, they're gonna keep the money. They'll credit it to whoever's account is gonna match.
That's crazy.
Luckily, at the time, my brother was working with Wells Fargo, and I called him, I said, I don't have a good feeling on this, can you call me the wire? He's like, you got wire fraud.
Yeah.
And she's like, this is not the right person. I said, what? No. So, yeah, so it was crazy. We were down a couple of thousands, but at least we didn't lose all that money. It took like about 2 weeks to get the money back, but FBI got involved with, but then they blocked the account, so that was good, because they had already transferred part of the money to another bank.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was wire fraud, but luckily, it was bad.
They'll do that fast too. They'll start transferring immediately.
Yeah,
So
they-
agents, make sure your buyers and sellers know why escrows want to verify your account numbers, okay?
It's imperative.
There was a very experienced buyer, not my transaction, but my friend's. He relied on purely email. He's like, oh, I've been buying, selling, I know this, I know everything. So he wired his money based on the email that was given to
Yeah.
him with no verification over the phone. He lost that money.
There's no getting it back.
And and the problem is we release it in an identity now, because like say when you guys as officers send the wires and I approve them, once I approve those wires, the bank is not gonna take responsibility. We lost that money. So once they release it, that's it. That's why we're so.
What I'm trying to say.
No
is-
insurance.
Yeah.
No insurance will cover it. That's
What I'm trying to say is buyers, sellers sometimes get annoyed that we want to verify.
But it's for their own
And that
security.
we want the buyers to call us for EMD, call us for the account number. And I even had buyers say, why is your account number such a secrecy? You know, like being all sarcastic about it.
But the moment you tell them it's for
They
fraud
don't know
protection,
how serious the problem is. And the sellers too, sometimes they can give you an account number, they wrote it down, and they're like, I wrote it down, why are you still calling me?
Yeah.
We need to verify. We really need to
And like I
verify.
said early on too, make
Some
title
sellers give
bad
you the
guys.
account number in writing, and 2 weeks later, they close the account and didn't even tell you.
Yeah.
We need to verify right before we process the wire.
Yeah.
They need to know why we're doing this. Don't get annoyed at us.
So I have a question.
Yes.
I know you were sharing about fraud with sellers. You were mentioning a lot with sellers. What about buyers?
So that's what FinCEN is about. That's what the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, that's what the anti-money laundering rule is about. Fraudulent buyers, I mean, generally it's gonna be different, but what they're trying to do in that case is usually they're laundering money. They're laundering, dirty
Source of
money.
funds.
It happens a lot across the southern border with investment properties across the southern border. If you've ever seen Sicario, they actually specifically talk about it in that movie, which I think is kind of cool. It's a really good movie. But yeah, so fraud does happen on the buyer's end too. A lot of the time, the buyers and the sellers will both be entities and they're actually both the same person. But once that money gets laundered through the transaction, it's looked at as thing. So yes, yeah. So that's why the FinCEN rule, it's real and it does protect against fraud and against money laundering. It's just a pain in the butt for you guys.
And FinCEN is just for cash buyers, it's not if they're taking like a LLC is taking a hard money loan?
Hard money, seller carryback,
LLC trust, everything else.
LLC trusts are considered entities. Yeah, it's gonna be a big change. That's why I'm really excited that we are going to take most of the onus off escrow to be able to help with it.
Well, I think we saw a lot of rings of straw buyers. There was a lot of rings actually. Those of you that remember in 2008, 2009,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, there's a lot.
There's like a whole team, you know, that was involved with that, and of course they all went to jail, but, you know, like you said, everybody, you have like a whole
Yeah.
straw buyers,
And it's terrorist organizations that are doing it. It's like
Yeah,
legitimate,
absolutely.
not just the cartels who we also identify as terrorist organizations now, but legitimate terrorist organizations.
That's why they require if you have a out of the country customer that they have to provide you their passport. They have to
Yes.
give you all that.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter for what country you need to get a passport.
And as realtors, like I got a couple, through WhatsApp, you know, you get a lot of, they're filling you out, oh, I wanna buy this $1 million property
Yep.
and make me a cash offer, and then as soon as you start to ask for proof of funds or, you know,
Yeah.
legal, then they're like, oh, no, I'll send it to you, but they never send it, but in the meantime, you're like, bye. Don't waste your time, yeah, they don't want me,
Yeah, I received a few like that on my WhatsApp. Oh,
yeah,
I have this buyer who wants to buy from you, can you please help?
no,
I said, I don't.
you gotta meet in person.
Can I draw a deed of trust where I'm the Benny and the trustor and record it to protect my equity?
Can you?
Yeah.
Yes, you can, but you're putting a cloud on title. I mean,
But only I can release?
that's the thing. I mean, the title company in the end, who's gonna end up insuring after that gets released, will have, you know, they're gonna ask you why, they're gonna ask for proof that you were the actual Benny on the property too. In a case like that, it's you voluntarily putting a cloud on your own property, right? You're putting a cloud on your property to try to protect your property. And that's the guy that I talked about who had, you know, 80 vacant lands listed. That's what he goes, well, can't we just put a cloud on all of these properties to protect them? And I said, well, yeah, you can, but here's an example of somebody who did exactly that. Okay, this guy called me one day and he had $1 million private deed of trust recorded on his property. He's the one that recorded it though, right? But he made the mistake of, as he put the beneficiary as some fake corporation. It was just a name that he pulled out of thin air, okay? So $1 million deed of trust with some random corporation name, but it turns out that there was an actual corporation by that exact name.
But why would you do a rundown?
I'm sorry?
You can search.
Why would you do a rundown?
Well, you can
Because he was
search.
a dum-dum.
Yeah, you can search.
So this company is the owner of that unit trust, and then
That's
how you
And,
release?
and they were a defunct company, they had been suspended at some point, right? So there's nobody to release this, no,
Oh my God.
So they have.
maybe he
nothing
could do a
under
loss
bond?
instrument bond, but even at that case, it's $1 million deed of trust. It's gonna be
Thousands.
15 grand probably.
20 grand.
So there was nothing he could do. And I'm talking to him, and by the end of it, I'm like, look, I believe you, but that's not enough. You know, I did believe him. I believed that he did it on purpose. So he started with an idea that is actually a way to potentially fight fraud on your property. But I mean, look, you can record it on your property, but it could be
I know how to draw a deed of trust. I can put me as a Benny.
I mean, I don't, that's the thing. You can record it. The question is, yes, you can record it. It is recordable, and yes, it will probably
So what
stop
would
any
be an
fraud.
option to prevent that if you're not about to use that, what she's suggesting?
That's the question that I expected somebody to answer, is what can we do to stop this up front? And that's why I made it so very clear that it's really easy to walk into the county recorder and record anything. There's very
There's no
little that you
protection
can
of
do.
the county office.
There's very little that you can do up front.
So there's nothing.
You can always check, I mean, for your own personal properties, call your title company every once in a while, check the chain of title, make sure nothing new has been recorded. There are products that are unrelated to title insurance, like Title Lock, but even them, they notify you after the fact, after something has happened. And they do kind of have some insurance, you'll get like 50 grand or something to help you fight the fraud or stuff like that. So what can you do to legitimately protect your property? There's very little. Putting the property in the trust does add a bit of a barrier,
Okay.
but still, somebody who knows how to prepare a deed can just put on the trustee and record it, you know, and then pull it. So there will be a deed, you know, that looks like it's a deed out of the trust over to an individual. Most title companies at that point are gonna require like, you know, a copy of the trust or a trust or something. But if they're doing like an under the table all cash transfer, there's no title company involved too. There's nothing you can do to stop it, because you're never gonna know what's going on until you get that notification from the county, hey, this was reported on your property.
Well, that'd be so crazy, so it's better not to be a homeowner, I guess.
You're not allowed to say that in this industry. We don't like renters.
It just starts with the government, there's no protection.
There's no protection. But no, there are people out there trying, like I said,
Yeah.
me personally, even I try to get on the phone with the assessor and figure out what they can do. So,
Maybe do a committee, has to be something done.
yeah,
Maybe you guys title.
I want to see the guy that I'm partnering with on that letter. I want to see how far that goes too, and I want to see who we can get it to and how many
That's
signatures we
scary.
can get on it.
You
It's a good
can
starting
have
point.
something and then at the end you might not have anything, you get over and I was like, what, you don't have a house or you don't have your house?
I mean, you have to go to court and find out. I don't think it clouds the title, basically.
Yeah, it does.
It just clouds it.
It
but
just
I mean,
depends,
it's
you
good,
have
yeah.
to, it's gonna
Yeah,
cost, it's
yeah,
costing
yeah.
to get that paid.
It's going to be out of your own pocket potentially to pay for that.
Yes,
It
it's
is.
gonna cost you at the end of the day.
So ultimately, I gave you the tools to be able to protect your clients, right? Or, protect yourself really, the fraudulent transaction. But I would ask, if you have the opportunity, if you're ever in a situation where you guys are worried that you're taking a listing that isn't legitimate, first of all, give me a call anytime. It doesn't have to be my order, but you should know that if you choose to work with me, you're gonna be in good hands. Before I walked in there, one of my great agents called me, she said, I have a vacant land listing I want you to take, I'm gonna text you the information. And I immediately asked her, are you sure you're dealing with the seller, right? So your title person shouldn't just take the open order, shouldn't just do the listing, because they should be aware of the fraud that's out there. Should you choose to work with me, you'd be in really good hands. And I think the expert ladies here would attest to that too.
Trust me, you are.
Okay,
He's available all the time.
all the time, weekends,
And then
nights.
you guys have the advantage that he has the title officer experience, so he knows all the ins and outs of transactions.
I appreciate it. It is.
Thank you.
Hope you found that beneficial.
Yes, thank you so much, appreciate you.
Now, I'll give a little kick